Hey guys, here we go. I think I found a better app to record my presentation for you. Um, so yeah, this is gonna be hopefully not too long. Right now it's 7:30 p.m. on Sunday, and I hope this doesn't. I'll try to cut it before an hour. It won't be that long. Anyway, welcome. Um, I am looking forward to seeing you all this week. We have our Zoom meeting, so make sure you check that. Check with your inbox this week for that. You see, got my pointer going. Check your inbox for any information regarding this week. There's a lot there. You got to look through that. Okay. Number 2, we're going to go over this idea of American imperialism today. Key part of Unit 7. This is a huge unit, Unit 7, and you have to know it for the AP test. It looks like they're going to be cutting the AP test down to units 1 to 8, so leaving out unit 9. So we're pretty much on track, but we still really have to go through each thing, or the last 2 units thoroughly so that you do well. Yes, so we're going to look over American imperialism in general, and then specifically at the Spanish-American War, and then tomorrow you'll be looking at the Philippine-American War. Just to let you know, there are these AP lessons on YouTube for period 8. It says up to period 8. Okay, no, just it's on period 8. Okay. Lastly, okay, wait, does that, okay. Your study groups. I want you guys to all have someone to study with. So let me just X myself out really quick. Boom. Anyway, you need a study partner or maybe a group chat going because it's really hard to process all of this information by yourself. Maybe you're interpreting something the wrong way. Maybe you're confused by something really small that one person can explain to you, and it can change everything and make it all make sense. So make sure you have someone to check in with, and that's your homework to study for the Unit 7 quiz, which is on Thursday, and try to get a study group going. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Our learning objectives today is to explore the origins of expansion of the U.S. beyond its continental borders, so beyond the North American continent. To look at the U.S.'s presence in occupation in other countries, which is better known as imperialism, and then to look at the imperialist policies meaning laws and actions that started after the Industrial Revolution, how that contributed to the United States' rise to world power as we know it today. So some key things to think about, and you'll notice this is kind of me repeating what I've repeated a few times in class. Imperialist motivations, so what motivated the U.S. to take over other lands, was economic opportunity and access to natural resources. As I've mentioned before, the more land that you have, the more natural resources you can access and then make things out of those natural resources and then sell them for a profit. I don't know if anybody's playing Animal Crossing right now, so sorry if this is irrelevant to you and you're not playing Animal Crossing. But in Animal Crossing, you literally are on an island. You take all of the trees, fruits, and everything, and you sell it for a profit. You're colonizing an island. And I mean, there can be arguments, I know, for how Animal Crossing is maybe not colonization, but nevertheless, that idea of having land to then make a profit off of is what motivated imperialists. But our leaders are not going to necessarily flat out say we're taking over a land for economic profit, okay? Because that sounds greedy, doesn't sound good to the moral American or moral person that is kind of indifferent to it all. So what the leaders are going to say is that, or how they're going to frame their imperialism is by using reasoning that is really all kind of superiority. First of all, the US is going to say that lands like the Philippines or Asian countries in particular need to be Christianized. Okay, doesn't that have a connection to something else? Okay, colonization. They're going to say, the leaders are going to say, we need to make sure democracy is established in all parts of the world, since we are a country founded on life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's going to be one of the reasons that we use to get involved in the Spanish-American War. And you'll see how that's ironic later, because we controlled the lands that we took over in the Spanish-American War and did not really give them independence for a long time. And then another argument is going to be, also going back to colonization and westward expansion, civilizing people. Okay, civilizing the indigenous people or the people who live in countries like the Philippines or South America or Guam. Okay, we're going to be looking more at that superiority complex, that civilizing people. That goes all the way back to colonization and westward expansion. We just saw how the natives were forced to assimilate in westward expansion, and we know that the civilizing or lack of civilization from the natives was what caused or contributed to colonization of the Americas. So lots of continuation arguments that could happen. Remember, in the AP test, you're usually talking about cause and effect or continuation. So something to think about with this particular unit. Okay. Some key ideas of imperialism in general. When you hear Age of Empire, we're talking about imperialism. Empire, what's that? That's the large land that goes beyond the immediate country of a nation. So this is the US expanding beyond its borders, Age of Empire. There's in the earlier 1800s, before the period that we're studying, the Monroe Doctrine was written by our president at the time, James Monroe. A doctrine, it's kind of like, sorry about that noise. It's kind of like a philosophy, like Manifest Destiny. Basically, what the US said to Europe is that we have dibs on the Western Hemisphere. So, hold on. I think this is, yeah. So, to Europe, they said, Europe, you can have Africa, you can do whatever you want over there, but we have South America, you can't come here. We get all of this land if we're going to imperialize it. Okay, so they said, Europe, stay away from the Western Hemisphere. All right. And then the open door policy. So ironically, we're saying to Europe, hands off of Western Hemisphere. But some years later, in that same century, the 19th century, late 1800s, China is getting out of these civil wars, and it's in really a bad economic situation. And these European countries see an opportunity to colonize China, and they want to split up China and basically make it into colonies. But the US sees that as an economic threat. All these countries are going to get China and get this land and get to colonize it, and we're not going to get in on it. We're just going to make this policy called the open door policy, which is a treaty with China, a trade treaty, basically saying, oh, the US can trade here too, and you guys can't just all colonize it. So we're just being pretty greedy at this time. We're saying, what? We're saying no Monroe Doctrine, or we're saying no access to South America with Monroe Doctrine, and you guys can't just split up China without thinking about us. We need to be able to access that. So thank you. So those are some things to think about in this time period. And then the Spanish-American War. What does this say? U.S. wanting. Oh, did not finish that. Well, it's the U.S. wanting to have control of the Caribbean islands. There's a lot of sugar and other resources that come from those areas that were originally Spanish colonies, but the U.S. is in really close proximity to that, of those islands geographically. So they want to take over. And then from the Spanish-American War, another Spanish land, or land that was occupied by Spain, was the Philippines. And those islands were then annexed, like given to the United States, even though the Filipino people did not want that to happen, so that led to a war there. And we're going to look at that tomorrow. All right. So that's just some background. I know it's a lot coming at you. You didn't really have to take any notes with that. Just wanted to give you that heads up. We're going to go now. Okay. Hold on. To this link. Hopefully it's still recording. We'll see at the end of this. Oh yeah, it looks like it's still recording. Okay. So, U.S. imperialism, American imperialism. One of the big events of this was the Spanish-American War. Okay. All right. You might want to pause the video also, by the way, and get out your table of contents and all of that, because you're going to be taking notes. And I'll tell you the GPO in a second, but the title can be Spanish-American War. All right. You know how these notes work. The GPO is investigating the world. So go ahead and add that to your notebook. You can type it, but yeah, it has to go. You have to be writing. You have to be active while you're listening right now. I obviously won't get to check it, so this is on you. Okay, there's going to be an exit ticket at the end. So yeah, take notes, please, while you're watching. So the learning objective. By the end of this lesson, we will be able to describe the Spanish-American War, U.S. expansion in the South Pacific. Our essential question that's driving our investigation is, how did the U.S. rise to world power in the 20th century? Right? The U.S. became one of the strongest nations in the world when it was a really young country. And it was a combination of events that led us to this big, steep trajectory to power, world power. And with industrialization, a series of wars, imperialism, and other events that basically boosted our power, we saw our rise to being, I guess, like number one country at that time. Not that I'm saying we're number one or anything like that, but just in terms of power, a few things led us there. Okay, some vocab. Imperialism, if that's still confusing to you, here's the definition. It's the policy or practice of extending a country's power by taking another country's land or by gaining political and economic control of that country. All right, so make sure you write that down. And we have expansion, which you already know, so you don't have to necessarily write it down. Just like the extension of a state's territory. And then foreign policy. So the open door policy was a foreign policy, and we're going to be looking at other foreign policies, like in diplomacies in this time period. Basically, foreign policy is when a government makes laws about how to deal with other countries. So a government strategy in dealing with other nations. All right, Spanish-American War was in 1898. It's a conflict between the US and Spain that ended Spanish colonial rule in the Americas and resulted in US acquisition of territories in the Western Pacific and Latin America. So, where's my pointer? Let's see. All right. 1898, turn of the century, Spanish-American War. This is right before we go into our 1900s, right before we have the progressives and economic booms of the 1900s. We're getting a lot of our resources and creating new weapons and technology to fight wars, to gain land. So you can see we gained land in the Western Pacific and Latin America. We got Guam, we got the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. We didn't acquire Cuba, but we controlled it for a while. And you can see, the U.S. is really close to these formerly Spanish colonies. Here's Spain, so we were a bit closer, have an advantage in fighting that war. And then here, the Philippines and Guam, they were ceded, that means given, from Spain to the US. Okay? This guy, who's that? President Roosevelt, before he's President Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt, that is. There's two Roosevelts you got to know about. Teddy Roosevelt is this guy. He is, him and his Rough Riders, they were a volunteer army to fight in the Spanish-American War. He prided himself in being like a really tough man, and ready to fight for his country. And, he loved, like, the teddy bear is named after him because he was kind of like a woodsy kind of guy. He liked to go hunting and stuff. So Teddy Roosevelt, when you see a guy with a mustache and a hat in political cartoons, that's him. All right. Causes of the Spanish-American War. So Cuba fought for independence against Spain. There was a sense of Spanish colonial rule being unjust. I mean, there was still, Spanish misrule. The Cuban people wanted their independence against whatever Spanish leaders were there. And, the Cuban people were, at that point, a mix of the Spanish descendants and descendants of African slaves and whatever few indigenous people that lived there. So they just kind of had their own identity as a new group of people, kind of like, how America, the American colonists had their own identity that was separate from their mother country. So that's what happened with Cuba too. And in the US, there was a lot of sensationalized, like exaggerated journalism that convinced people that this was a real issue. Okay? Back here, you can see two patriots, right? Patriots harkens all the way back to the American Revolution, saying we are the same colonial or former colonies fighting for our own statehood. We got to be allies. And then there was this mystery sinking of a U.S. ship that was not necessarily caused by Spain, but because it remained mysterious, the yellow journalism, the fake news at that time, the tabloid news sensationalized that. Okay, why would the media need to sensationalize this? Well, people aren't going to just fight for a war. People aren't going to sign up to fight for a war if there's not a really good reason. So the reason, or the way that powerful people in the US got this war to be more convincing to join, was using these ideals of American patriotism and freedom, but also creating fake threats to remember a country that is very close to our country. And then the war is started April 21st, 24th of 1898. The war started with the US invading the Philippines, okay? Because remember, Spain controlled the Philippines. And then from May to August, we took over. And then, like I mentioned, Teddy Roosevelt took his Rough Riders, his army, there he is again with the hats and the mustache, to Santiago de Cuba and defeated the Spanish army there by July 17th. Okay, so short war. It started April that year, ends in July. All right. There's a video linked if you want to watch it. Kind of just saying everything I just said, but probably in a more concise way because I feel myself lagging as I talk. Okay. Treaty of Paris. This is just the agreement that's saying the U.S. gets Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. And access to the Panama Canal later. Cuba gained independence from Spain, but the U.S. had control over Cuba for a really long time. They instilled specific rules that the Cubans had to obey, like American government as they set it up there, and then slowly that was called the Platt Agreement or Platt Amendment, just basically saying Cuba had to obey American leadership. And then eventually the Platt Amendment fades away, but and Cuba has more independence, but then there's some corruption there, and then that's way down the line, and then the U.S. stopped doing any sort of economic or diplomatic business with Cuba way down the line, late like in the 1950s, yeah, with the Cuban Revolution. Excuse me. I need some water, man. It's talking a lot. Okay. So, as you know, the U.S. acquired lands from this war. Pretty straightforward. Okay, that's all that needs to be said. We got Guam, Puerto Rico, Philippines, and yeah, those materials, right? We have new raw materials that we can use to make goods. All right, next time on American Imperialism, what you're going to learn about tomorrow is the Philippine-American War. You're going to look at some primary sources. You're going to see some attitudes, American attitudes, on why this war should be fought. You're going to look at some interesting, by interesting, I mean sometimes disturbing, political cartoons regarding this war. It'll be good practice for you analyzing primary source documents. It should be fun because it is mostly images that you're analyzing. So that's for next time. And to wrap up, I want you to read Khan Academy. I've already assigned it to you. And then I will put those 3 questions at the end into your exit ticket. So make sure you answer those exit ticket questions at the end of today. And then explain how you took notes during this. Okay? All right. Hopefully that was not too painful. Oh, it's like 20 minutes or something. 7:56. Great. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There's your Khan Academy. Yep. Just make sure you have that study group. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Still working through this teaching online, and I'm looking forward to our Zoom meeting on Wednesday. Okay? I know it's early. It's okay. The reason why it's early, the teachers have to do professional development this week, and there's portfolios, so my afternoons are just packed. So we have to, but I really need to talk to you guys, give you some information and check in because, yeah, there's a lot going on and we're going to make it through this together. And yeah, hope you're staying positive and communicating with me. I appreciate all of your communication and I appreciate all your hard work.